Crossing+Aerial+Space+Food+Doing Business+Opening a Store+Medical Skills+Getting Rich. Due to an accident, Yunqing returned to the body of a 200-pound chubby girl with the same name and surname in ancient times. A good hand at cooking, a good hand at poisoning, no, a good hand at pulse. At the beginning, she married a hunter surnamed Shen from the same village and became a mother painlessly, resulting in a pair of beautiful children. Although the Shen family was surrounded by bandits, God favored her and gave her a department store building. It's really heaven's help for her. Let's have some delicious food. Let's open up the shop. Make money. Her delicious food and wine have been sold in the capital, in the northern region, and she has made a fortune by making a fortune. He also saved the Emperor Laozi and said he would grant her a mountain of gold and silver. What? Her prime minister is actually the great general of the Northern Protectorate. Her beautiful children were former princes and princesses. She also became a first-class imperial lady. What kind of life winner is she? Win thoroughly, win thoroughly. Chapter 1. Getting married at the beginning. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Today, the Su family is getting married. Qinghe village can be described as bustling with gongs and drums, and firecrackers. Mrs. Su, who has always been known for being stingy, was willing to take out a coffin to entertain guests. A few of them had enough to eat and drink, and the old lady was idle, quietly chatting about gossip. I said Shen was also unlucky. After all, he became a receiver. Yes, but although Shen doesn't have a father or mother, and still has 2 babies, he looks like a first-class person. He also knows how to hunt, and at first glance, he is someone who can make a living. Otherwise, this old lady Su is very clever. Not only did she maintain the reputation of the Su family, but she also received a dowry and a wild boar. Although she couldn't compare to the previous family surnamed Zhao, she didn't suffer much. It's just that. Su Yunqing slept in a daze, feeling someone leaning over. She reflexively picked up the heavy and hard wooden pillow she was resting on and smashed it hard at the other person. But it was dodged. She lifted her foot and kicked the other person again. The other person grabbed her ankle and pulled hard, and the whole person was held in the man's arms. The next second, like something filthy, pushed her away. At this moment, she was completely awake. As soon as he looked up, he met the man's dark, bottomless eyes like a cold pool, and instinctively moved away, secretly glancing at him through the corner of his eye. I was shocked in my heart. This man is too pretty, isn't he? Completely rooted in her aesthetic point, a sharply defined silhouette, thick eyebrows and large eyes, and a high and straight nose bridge. Although dressed in coarse linen clothes, it was still difficult to conceal the extraordinary temperament emanating from her body, and it was the intimidating gaze that glared at her. Shen turned around and walked outside, looking back at her before crossing the threshold. He said in a deep voice, "Don't worry, although we got married, if you don't agree, I won't force you. And I don't ask you anything else, as long as you treat Luo'er and Ku'er well." After he finished speaking, he went out directly and even closed the door on the way. Su Yunqing looked around the whole room, and if it weren't for the word happiness pasted on the door, she couldn't even tell it was a wedding room. Not right. Isn't the kitchen on fire? Did she burn to ashes before she could escape? What is this place again? Moreover, the decorations in this room, as well as her wedding dress and the man's attire just now, are clearly the attire of ancient people. She was thinking about it when suddenly her skull was in pain and a memory that didn't belong to her squeezed into her mind. So she has traveled through time. Wearing back to an ancient 200-pound chubby girl with the same name and surname, who had lost her mother since childhood, had a useless father, and was disliked by her stepmother and grandmother. However, although the original owner had a slightly bulky physique, he also had some beauty. So when she just reached the age of marriage, Grandma Su wanted to sell her for a good price. This is not. 3 days ago. The original owner was granted the son of a wealthy family surnamed Xiao in the county, Chongxi. As a result, the man died before the person had even passed away. The people of the Zhao family believed that the original owner was a disaster star and demanded to divorce and return the dowry. As soon as this matter spread, it exploded. The original owner couldn't resist the rumors and jumped into the river. Coincidentally, Shen, who lived in the village, passed by and jumped down without saying a word to rescue the person. But I don't want to not only be unkind, but also get into all my belongings, including a wild boar. Because it was midsummer, the original owner's clothes were thin, and after getting wet, they stuck to his body, seeing everything and being told even more unpleasant things. In addition to being angry, Mrs. Su's mind twitched and she came up with a solution. She decided to trick Shen into marrying her own granddaughter. This not only saved the reputation of the Su family, but also earned a dowry money. Although it may not be as much as what the Zhao family gave before, having it is always better than not having it. So she went to the Shen family to make trouble, and Shen was so upset that she agreed to marry the original owner and give the two babies a stepmother. After falling into the water, the original owner caught a cold wind and burned for 3 days and 3 nights. Grandma Su was reluctant to spend money on hiring a doctor, and the original owner hiccuped before getting married. This old lady Su is also a cunning person. As if she didn't know, she still had someone get on the sedan chair and deliver it to the Shen family. She thought she should have taken advantage of this opportunity to pass through. So today is the day she got married to that man. Su Yunqing slapped her forehead. Oh my goodness, she thought only TV dramas would perform so badly, but she didn't expect to be caught in a basin of dog blood too. I'm really angry with her. However, Su Yunqing is not the submissive and soft persimmon of the original owner who can be easily squeezed. What kind of poisonous grandmother, poisonous stepmother, and cowardly father? She's not afraid, just wait for them all. She needs to take care of them slowly. She glanced at the food on the table and touched her already hungry stomach. It turned out that the man had just come to deliver food to her. But is it a bit too light to eat? It's a hard wawatu, a thin brown rice porridge, a small plate of pickles, and a beggar. At least Su Yunqing is also the head chef of Samsung Michelin. When did she treat her stomach so badly? And as she was about to get up and go out, she saw that the door had been opened by someone from outside. Then a small head poked in, met her gaze, and then shrank back. Hey, is she so scary? Su Yunqing walked over and opened the door. It turned out there were not just one, but two. It is estimated that they are 3 or 4 years old, and they look exactly the same. They are twins. 2 milk dolls also looked at her timidly with round and big eyes. Soft, cute, and creamy, just like walking out of a New Year painting, extremely beautiful. Luor, Kur, come over and have dinner quickly. At this moment, a man's voice came from another room, and the 2 milk buns ran away at the sound. What does it mean? Why can't she eat with her? Is she a fierce beast? Su Yunqing turned around and took the wawadu, the brown rice porridge and the small butterfly pickles out of the door and walked towards the house. The 3 people who were eating saw her appear at the door and looked over in unison, all stunned for a moment. Su Yun cleared his eyes at them, tugged at the corner of his mouth, chuckled, and said, I'll eat with you. Then, without waiting for their reaction, he walked in and sat down on the chair. She glanced into the bowls of the 3 people again and sighed silently. She thought the man didn't like her, so she gave her these to eat, but she didn't expect the food to be the same. These ones are still so small, how can they be nutritious just by eating them? How can they grow taller without nutrition? Why just eat this? As soon as she finished speaking, she heard the little boy pouting his mouth and muttering discontentedly, Isn't it because Dad used all his money to marry you, so we can only eat these? Su Yunqing choked on his words and closed her mouth. Although what he said was not entirely correct, there was indeed her reason behind it. Luor, don't talk too much. Hurry up and have a meal. Shen scolded, then looked at Su Yunqing sitting directly across from him and said in a voice, I'll make do with it for now, and I'll figure out a way tomorrow. After dinner, it was already dark and Su Yunqing returned to her room. She sat cross-legged on the bed, her mind filled with images of two children chewing on their hard and bumpy heads, which made people feel heartbroken. Since she has survived on behalf of the original owner and married this man, she is temporarily the stepmother of the two children, and has a responsibility to be good to them. Besides, she has no other place to go now. As for the future, let's take a closer look. If this man behaves well and looks pretty, she can also consider accepting him. If he's a stinky man, let's just leave. It's not a big deal. She just searched through her body but couldn't find a copper coin, and all the dowry money given by the man went to the hands of the old lady Su. No, she needs to go get it back. At least she can get some back. Chapter 2. She is not a vegetarian. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The next morning, Su Yunqing didn't even have breakfast, so she went back to the Su family. Seeing that the Su family hadn't gotten up yet, she kept knocking on the door. Upon hearing this, Grandma Su opened a crack in the door and saw that it was as if she had seen a ghost. She then slammed the door shut. I caressed my undulating chest, thinking that I had hallucinations due to my own blurred vision. Then I glanced out from the crack in the door, and it was indeed her. This little scumbag hasn't died yet, and he's coming back before it's time to return. What are you trying to do? Mother, what's wrong with you? Lu Shi saw her come in from outside with a panicked expression and muttered to herself, somewhat puzzled. Grandma Su sat down on the chair, took a sip of the teacup at hand, calmed down before speaking, it's nothing, go do your job, don't ask what you shouldn't ask. Lu let out an "oh" and continued back to the kitchen to make breakfast. And Su Yunqing, who was rejected from the door, was amused by Grandma Su. Did she not expect her to be still alive, or did she not expect her to come back like this? Do you think closing the door will make it okay? She is not a vegetarian, Su Yunqing. Besides staying in the kitchen, she also likes to practice taekwondo. She can beat a strong man down in front of her. So despite the original owner's chubby figure, this low wall is still not difficult for her. I found 2 large stones and placed them together, then stepped on them, propped my elbows against the wall, and reached for them with my feet. After climbing up, I jumped down and landed easily. She stood up and patted the soil on her hands, then walked straight to the hall. But halfway through, I met Lu Shi, who came out of the kitchen. This was the woman married by the father of the original owner, and she had the same nose as the old lady to vent her anger. She also had a share in selling the original owner. Su Yun lifted a smile and greeted her warmly, "Hi, Mom, good morning." Lu was so scared that the breakfast she was holding in her hand didn't hold steady and fell directly to the ground. She spilled it and didn't dare to pick it up. She ran towards the hall and kept shouting, "Mom! Mom!" Su Yunqing smiled, walked over, picked up one of the white flower mantou that fell on the ground, wiped it, and bit it. It's fresh from the pot, soft and fragrant. This dead old woman sold her granddaughter and emptied her family's assets, then ate her own white noodles and let her 2 milk dolls gnaw on the hard nest, without fear of being struck by lightning. Mrs. Su saw Mrs. Lu running in a panic and almost didn't knock her down. With an unhappy expression on her face, she angrily scolded, "What's wrong with you? What's breakfast?" The old lady has a rule that she must have breakfast before the hour every day. Lu gasped for breath and glanced at the door before whispering, "Mom, that dead girl Yunqing has returned. I really saw it and even smiled at me. Yesterday she also knew that she had swallowed her anger. The old lady even gave her 5 taels of silver to prevent her from speaking out. Did someone come in?" The Lu Shi kept nodding and was just about to speak when she saw Su Yun and the Qin dynasty women coming over with half a mantu in their hands and chewing while walking. "Grandma, when did our family eat so well? There are white flour mantu to eat. You don't know that the Shen family only has hard state wawatu and thin brown rice porridge." Lu Shi thought of the mantu that fell on the ground, and now he saw her eating it again, which made him very distressed. It was white noodles that he had just bought yesterday. "What are you doing here? It's not time to come back yet." Grandma Su pointed at her and shouted at her, pretending to be calm. Su Yunqing found a chair to sit down, but it was taken away by Su Siyu, the stepsister of the original owner, who came out of the room, causing her to almost fall and squat. Su Yunqing grabbed her and slapped her twice, then pushed her back. Su Siyu didn't stand firm and fell out, hitting her head on the door panel with a loud bang. "Ah! Su Yunqing, you scumbag, I'm going to kill you." Su Siyu covered her forehead, enduring the burning pain on her cheeks, and rushed towards her. Su Yunqing dodged, and she fell forward, screaming in pain. Grandma Su was so angry that she knocked heavily on her crutch and angrily cursed, "You despicable hoof, have you not ruined the reputation of the Su family enough? What are you doing back for?" Upon hearing her words, Su Yunqing felt angry and turned to look at her. With a cold voice, he said, "Did I ruin the reputation of the Su family? If it weren't for your dead old lady marrying me to a dying person for the sake of money, would I be scolded? And if you two knew I was already out of breath and still married me to Shenan, wouldn't you be afraid of retribution?" Grandma Su seemed to have been hit on the spot, so angry that she jumped 3 feet high and pointed at her. Her voice trembled a bit as she spoke. "You, what nonsense are you talking about? I didn't do it for your own good. Who knew your life was so cheap and you didn't have that good fortune? And you, aren't you okay? How could you be so angry?" "That's right, if it weren't for the Su family giving you food and drink, I would have followed your dead mother long ago," Lu Shi agreed on the side. "Ha ha ha." Su Yunqing burst out laughing when he heard the two of them say, "Who used to work in this family? It was me who worked for you and served you. Mother, sister. Law, what are you doing?" Su Fuchen, the second son of the Su family, Su Xiuzai, came in from outside and looked at Su Yunqing with some surprise. "Miss Yunqing has returned. Isn't tomorrow the day to return home?" Upon seeing her son return, Grandma Su immediately put on a kind face and whispered, "Chunner, it's none of your business. Go back to the room and warm up your book." Su Fuchen nodded and replied, "Okay, Mom." Then he glanced at Su Yunqing and walked towards his own room. And the reason why Grandma Su cares so much about the reputation of the Su family is because Su Fuchen is preparing to take the provincial examination, and bookworms are dreaming of winning. Su Yunqing didn't have time to continue playing with them, so he spoke up and said, "Give me 20 taels of silver. Otherwise, I would come over every day. I also want my neighbors to know that you, an old lady, married your granddaughter to a dying person for money, and even tricked Shenan's dowry in wild boar. I see if the reputation of the Su family can still be preserved. You despicable hoof, why don't you die?" Mrs. Su coughed fiercely in anger, almost unable to turn her back. Lu walked up to the old lady and helped her follow her back, whispering, "Mom, do you think this dead girl is not doing something right? How dare you talk to us like this before? I don't care if she's right or not, just kick her out." Mrs. Su didn't finish speaking, and many people gathered at the door to watch the lively eating of melons, whispering and whispering, "Isn't this Yunqing girl only married yesterday? Why did she come back today? Yes, this is not in accordance with the rules. Is it difficult to do so? What kind of tricks have emerged? I don't know, but Shenan doesn't seem like a short-lived person either. So why is that?" Li Shi, the second wife of the Su family, came out of the room and walked up to Grandma Su, whispering, "Mom, you can give it to her. Otherwise, if this continues, our Su family's reputation will be ruined. Mrs. Su glared at Li and pondered for a moment. She reluctantly took out an ingot of silver from her pocket and threw it at Su Yunqing's feet. Only 10 taels, do you want it or not? Don't pull it down. Okay, I'll endure it. 10 taels is 10 taels, it's better than nothing. Besides, what's the difference between face and money? When I earn money, I'll have you all kowtow to me one by one. Su Yunqing stood up and walked over, bent down to pick it up, weighed it in his hand, and then left in a good mood. Grandma, just let this cheap hoof go. Su Siu covered the bag on her forehead, glanced at the figure that had already disappeared at the door, and said angrily, so what should I do? Will this be a disguise? What's the ghost's name? Let her go, don't let this lowly hoof step into the Su family's door again in the future. The old lady glared at her, snorted, and went back to her own room. Lu also went back to the kitchen to cook breakfast. Su Yunqing walked towards the village in a good mood, intending to go to the county town to buy some food. She happened to come across a cart carrying goods and wanted the uncle to give her a ride. That uncle also knew her, and there was a girl at home who was the same age as her, so he sympathized with her and agreed to pick her up. Chapter 3. Raising Children with a Father, It's Good to Live. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Sitting on the ox cart, Su Yunqing was mentally calculating how to spend these 10 taels of silver. First of all, we must solve the problem of food, so we need to buy noodles and rice, as well as some meat to supplement the nutrition of the 2 children. Looking at those pale and skinny faces, I can't bear it. She looked at her clothes again. He meows. It's still yesterday's wedding dress. That old lady in Lu's shirt didn't give any dowry. So, I have to buy myself 2 sets of clothes. As for the remaining silver, just save it up. There will be many places to spend money in the long run. But Shen didn't see Su Yunqing in the morning, thinking she hadn't woken up, so he went to the room and called her to wake up for breakfast, but there was no one in the room either. He scratched his head and walked out when someone knocked on the door. He thought it was someone who had returned, walked over, and when he opened the door, he saw his neighbor Du Feng. Brother Shen, when I wake up in the morning, I will see my younger siblings going out. I feel strange and followed her for a while, and then I saw her go back to the Su family. I think something's wrong, so I'll come back and tell you. Du Feng saw his expressionless face and tentatively asked, Brother Shen, this younger sister won't regret it, will she? Then you need to go to the Su family and get the dowry money back. Shen remained expressionless, only making a soft sound before closing the door and walking inside with his foot raised. The next second, he turned around and walked towards the Su family. Regardless of whether she has changed her mind or not, he must go and ask for clarification. This marriage is not a child's play. Since you have become a relative, you can't just say you have to back out. Even if you have to back out, at least you have to give him an explanation. This is also his principle of doing things. He walked a bit fast and arrived at the Su family in just 1 cup of tea. He stood at the door, ready to knock, and his neighbors looked at him strangely. One of the old aunties who was also eating at the banquet yesterday recognized him and greeted him with a smile, Hey, isn't this Yunqing's husband? Yunqing just left, are you here to find her? Shen heard her say that Su Yunqing had left, and when he raised his hand, he withdrew it and looked at her, saying, Are you saying she really came back? She left again. Yeah, I still feel strange. It's not yet time to return home, why did she come back on her own? Is there anything wrong? The old lady said with a concerned expression. Shen glanced at the tightly closed door, then shook his head at her and said, It's okay, before leaving. Su Yunqing arrived at the county market, not sure if today was the day for the market. The streets were bustling with people and the sound of small vendors shouting kept coming and going. She was particularly eye-catching in red, found a cloth shop, spent 300 yuan to buy 2 clothes, changed her wedding dress, and then continued to buy other things. She thought of the hard-to-swallow mess at home and walked towards the grain shop. What do you need for this young lady? New rice is 8 yuan per kilogram, brown rice is 5 yuan per kilogram, and Shen rice is also 5 yuan per kilogram. The shopkeeper warmly introduced them to her one by one. Yunqing adhered to the principle that the province should have flowers, and directly said, "Shopkeeper, give me 5 pounds of new rice, 5 pounds of aged rice, and 5 pounds of white noodles." "Okay, young lady, please wait a moment." The shopkeeper responded and quickly packed it for her. After buying rice and noodles, she went to the meat shop opposite, bought 2 jin of pork, of fish, vegetables and various ingredients, and finally bought 2 strings of bingtanghulu, carrying them on her shoulders and hands, and returned with a full load. "I just didn't encounter a cart on the way back, and it took me half an hour to walk back home." Shen thought something was wrong with her and almost searched the entire village, but still couldn't find anyone. At this moment, he was walking home restlessly, and as soon as he returned to his doorstep, he saw Yunqing returning. Yunqing also saw him and didn't miss the surprised expression on his face when he saw her. Shen took a few steps closer to her, looked up and down at her, and finally said, "Where did you get the money to buy these things?" Yunqing didn't hide anything from him either, walking inside and saying, "I got it from Su's house." "Have you eaten it?" "I bought rice and meat." She had just finished saying that a baby came running and stared at the bingtanghulu in her hand. Yunqing handed it to her. "Here, this is for you too." The milk doll ran away with a clattering sound. Yunqing turned around and glanced at the man standing behind him who was still in a state of surprise. He smiled lightly and said, "You don't think I ran away or was looking for something short, do you? Don't worry, this world is so fun. I haven't lived enough yet. I won't take it too hard. Put my heart back in my stomach, okay?" Shen saw that she had hit the nail on his head and felt a slight fever in his ear. He scratched his hair and went back to the room. Yunqing looked at the figure and shook his head. He slurped and murmured, "Roast, this man is too ungrateful to help me." She took everything back to the kitchen and saw that it was empty, so she knew she had bought the right one. "I don't know how this man raised these 2 babies so big. Sure enough, it's the same throughout history. If my father raised the baby, it would be good to live." She rolled up her sleeves and quickly started cooking. "First, I found a smaller pot, grabbed a few claws of rice and put it in. After washing it clean, I added an appropriate amount of water, covered the pot lid, and put it on to cook the rice. Next, she started working on the fish, thinking that the 2 dolls were still small, so she specially bought a fish with fewer thorns. First, slaughter the fish, clean it thoroughly, cut a few cuts on the thick flesh on the back of the fish for easy flavor, and marinate it with salt and rice wine to remove the fishy smell. Taking advantage of this gap to cut pork, she specially bought a half-fat and lean piece of pork. The lean one was used to cook soup, while the fat one was cut into evenly sized chunks of fat to stir-fry fish and stir-fry vegetables. Green vegetables are directly washed and used to boil soup with lean meat. Finally, she cut scallions, ginger, garlic, and Sichuan peppercorns. She discovered that even ancient money didn't need to be spent. Just a few things cost 15 yuan, and a small jar of brown sugar costs 30 yuan. When the dishes are ready, the aroma of rice wafts in the kitchen. She opened the lid of the pot and saw that the rice was already cooked, crystal clear and fragrant. With a bottle of Old Godmother, she could cook 3 bowls of white rice. And just as she was thinking, a bottle of Old Godmother appeared on the stove, still unopened. Yunqing blinked his eyes. He reached out and picked it up in disbelief. He looked at it just like what she usually eats. She just said she wanted the godmother and she appeared. What if she wanted meat? Sure enough, another piece of pork appeared on the stove, which was still top-quality tenderloin. Yunqing felt a burst of joy. Last night, she couldn't sleep and complained about the unfairness of thieves. Others have space or golden fingers when traveling. It seems that she has wrongly blamed him, she should take back the words she cursed at him. However, these things won't appear out of thin air, so where did they come from? She was feeling a wave of dizziness when she opened her eyes and suddenly realized that she was in a department store that she often visited. Inside the building, there was a dazzling array of goods, but no one was there except for herself. She also noticed that the places she had taken them would be automatically replenished, especially the fresh food in the fresh area, which would be permanently preserved. Yunqing suppressed her inner ecstasy and tried to control the entry and exit several times with her mind. She took out all the ingredients needed for cooking and then began to stir-fry. She hummed a song in a happy mood and put the pickled fish into the pot to fry. As soon as she turned her head, she saw two small heads poking in at the door. Startled, they didn't see her just now, did they? You didn't treat her like a crazy person, did you? Chapter 4. Little boy is a little warmth boy. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Yunqing looked at them, smiled brightly, waved at them, and said in a gentle voice, "Come in, I'll make something delicious for you." Shen walked ahead, followed by Shen Luo. The two slowly moved to the side of the stove and kept looking into the pot with their little heads stuck out. Yunqing didn't miss the small movements of licking their lips and swallowing saliva. Turning around, he secretly took out 2 pieces of dim sum from the space and handed them. "Come on, you eat first and pad your stomach. After the fish and meat are cooked, we will have dinner." The 2 people looked at her and looked at the attractive dim sum in front of them. After hesitating, the little girl reached out her little hand to take them, and directly took a big bite, fragrant and sweet. They turned to look at Shen Luo, who had not moved. Some of them said indistinctly, "Brother, delicious." Shen Luo also reached out and handed it over to his sister, saying softly, "Brother, if you don't eat, I'll give it to you." Yunqing, who was busy, turned around to take a look at these words and was taken aback for a moment. She didn't expect this little brat to be a little warm-hearted man and treat her sister so well. After frying the fish and taking it out of the pot, she saw that there was pork tenderloin, so she added an extra sweet and sour pork tenderloin. Finally, she brought out the vegetable lean meat soup. Yunqing looked at the 2 babies who were swallowing saliva again and smiled. "Go call your dad to eat." As soon as she finished speaking, Shen nodded and ran out with her short legs clattering. Soon, she pulled a man with a stiff face to the dining table. Yunqing thought he was still blaming her for going out without saying hello in the morning, apologizing proactively, and even took out the remaining pieces of silver from his money bag and handed it to him. After all, it was all their belongings, and she thought it was normal even if he wanted to go back. But Shen only glanced at the silver she handed over and didn't reach out to take it. He said, "Since you know how to cook, you can take this silver money and treat it as a household item. If it's not enough, just tell me." Yunqing was not affected either. Seeing him say so, he put it away again. "Then sit down and pick up chopsticks to eat." During the meal, no one spoke, but Yunqing noticed that these 2 babies were picky eaters, both only eating meat. The vegetables they were serving were still in the bowl, and the man next to them was eating his own food. Yunqing sighed and looked at the 2 little ones in a somewhat serious tone, saying, "You 2 can't just eat meat and vegetables, will you grow taller?" The man and the 2 little ones looked at her in unison. The little girl blinked her big eyes and said in a sticky voice, "Can you be like Brother Guzzi?" "Who is Brother Guzzi?" As soon as Yun finished speaking, a small black dog walked in, sticking out its tongue and wagging its tail. She immediately understood that Der Qing, the little black dog with short legs, nodded and said, "Yes, it won't grow as tall as Guzzi. That Coeur needs to grow tall." The little girl said, and the vegetables in the bowl were instantly swept away by her like remnants of a cloud, leaving the 3 of them stunned. Although Shen Luo knew that Yunqing's words were intimidating, He felt embarrassed not to eat when he saw that his sister had eaten them all, and silently ate what was in his bowl. Yunqing nodded in satisfaction and looked up to see Shen still looking at her. With a stiff expression, she smiled and continued to lower her head to eat. And Shen was also surprised that the two children were so obedient to her. He was worried that they might not get along well. After all, he himself always wears a good skin. After lunch, Yunqing marinated the excess meat and then strung it up and hung it under the eaves to sun-dry into cured meat. Seeing the two little ones playing in the yard, their hair hadn't been washed for a long time and was tangled up in clumps. She went back to the kitchen to boil a pot of hot water, then took shampoo and shower gel from the space and called out the little girl. The little girl had gradually become familiar with her and ran over, grinning sweetly and shouting, "Mother." Yunqing was adorable by the milky voice of her mother, kissing her pink and tender little face. "Mother, how about washing Kuer's fragrance?" she said. "Okay, mother." The little girl nodded her head and obediently asked her to open her bun before starting to wash her hair. The little girl was so well behaved that she kept her head down and allowed her to wash slowly. Her hair was black and smooth, even though she was malnourished, it was even more than her original hair. She was so envious. After washing her hair, she started taking a shower. The little girl sat in the bathtub, playing with the shower bubbles, and was so happy. In order to avoid catching a cold, Yunqing picked up the person before the water cooled down, dried the water, and prepared to put on clothes. She just looked at it and it was too dirty. It was all patches, and she didn't know who patched it or picked it up. Such a beautiful little nanny, she should have been beaten up and dressed up beautifully. She took a beautiful little dress from the space and replaced it for her. "Kuer, do you like the new clothes?" Yunqing looked at the little girl constantly looking left and right, feeling extremely novel. The little girl didn't understand. Seeing the beautiful patterns on it, her eyes were attracted and she nodded incessantly. "Kuer likes it. Can Kuer wear the dirty clothes first, and then change them back after the mother washes them clean?" "Okay." She forgot to buy 2 new sets of clothes for the 2 little ones. Then Kuer will help her mother call for her brother to come over. After your hair dries, your mother will tie your hair in a bun. The little girl obediently ran out with her short legs, and when she changed the water, her brother came in. Yun lifted the towel in his hand and said, "Luo, come and wash the fragrance." Shen Luo slowly moved up to her, his little face almost turning red to the point of his ears. Yunqing reached out to pull him, but he pulled him away and said with some hesitation, "Dad said that men and women are not compatible, and Luo can wash it himself." Upon hearing his words, Yunqing chuckled and handed him the towel. "Okay, Luo can wash it herself, but she can't wash it for too long. If the water gets cold, she will catch a cold." Shen Luo nodded seriously, took the towel she handed over, and watched as she went out before taking a shower. Yunqing walked out of the room and arrived at the yard. He happened to see Shen carrying a backpack on his shoulder, ready to go out. When he saw her come out, he turned around and instructed, "Luo and Kuer, please take care of them. I'll go up the mountain and take a look." Yun nodded and said in a voice, "You go." She played with the little girl and the dog in the yard for a while, then went back to the room to see if the people inside had finished taking a shower. Just as she was about to open the door, it was open from inside. Shen Luo had already taken a shower and put on his own clothes. Yunqing praised him and then poured out the water. She also poured herself a large basin of water and took a comfortable bath. I don't know how long the original owner hasn't taken a bath, and every time she rubbed her body, it was covered in dirty things, like mud like dirt, which was terrifying. After taking a shower, Yunqing came to the river with his dirty clothes that he had changed. The small river flows around the village. In addition to the well, the villagers of Qinghe village also love to fetch water and wash things from the river. There are several long bluestone slabs by the river, which are specifically used for washing clothes. When she arrived, there happened to be several women fetching water and washing things. They were originally chatting enthusiastically, but when they saw her, they all closed their mouths and their expressions changed. They looked at her with strange eyes, as if she was something ominous. Chapter 5. Ways to Make Money. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. However, it can also be understood that the reputation of the original owner has already been avoided. Yunqing ignored them and placed the wooden basin on the bluestone slab, then took some water from the river and started washing clothes. What smells so fragrant? At this moment, one of the women, Gua, the neighbor of the Shen family, sniffed her nose. The others heard her words and also sniffed them. Finally, they all looked at Yunqing, who was focusing on washing clothes. Perhaps her gaze was too obvious, but Yunqing looked up and saw one by one, their eyes fixed on the bottle of laundry detergent she had in hand. Aunt Gua pointed and said in a voice, "What are you?" Yunqing picked it up and handed it to them. "This is laundry detergent, used for washing clothes." Washers. The women gathered around for a while to study, but didn't find a reason to do so. Yes, the clothes are especially clean and fragrant after washing. If you like them, you can take some back and try them out. Yunqing thought to herself. These are all neighbors in the village, and it would be great if we could get along well. And when they heard her words, they all shook their heads, saying they didn't need it, and Yunqing didn't force herself to continue washing her clothes. Another woman noticed her new clothes and whispered to the person next to her, "Hey, Aunt Zhou, you see, the Shen family has used all the money to marry her. She's really good, wearing such good clothes." Upon hearing her words, Aunt Zhou nodded in agreement and said, "Isn't that right? I just saw Shen carrying a backpack up the mountain again. Oh, sorry for the two little dolls, they have such a stepmother. It's just that." Yunqing rolled her eyes. This person didn't even know how to speak ill of others behind their backs. She was right next to her and could hear clearly. She didn't seem embarrassed at all. But she didn't have time to talk to them, thinking that the two babies were at home, so she quickly washed them and went back. And after she left, they started chatting again, all cursing the old lady of the Su family for not being a good person, sympathizing with Shen and her two children, and scolding Yunqing for only focusing on dressing up. As Yunqing walked away, she naturally didn't hear anything. Before she could reach her doorstep, she saw a person standing outside the yard, stretching her head and looking inside. She searched in her memory and found that this person was the owner's cowardly father, Su Fugue. He found a job moving goods at the dock, often returning home only once every 10.5 days, so he was unaware of the original owner's engagement and marriage. She walked over and passed by as if she hadn't seen anything. She was about to open the door and enter, but was stopped by Su Fugue. With a guilty expression on her face, she said, "Qing'er, Daddy knows now. It's Daddy who's sorry for you." Yunqing turned to look at her and said in a cold voice, "What's the use of saying these things? Even if you knew before, could you stop them? If not, then don't say these meaningless words. Please go back." "Qing'er." Su Fugue wanted to stop her, but she dodged him. He sighed helplessly and handed her 1 or 2 silver coins. "Qing'er, this is the salary my father earned this month, and Shen is not easy either. Take it." Before Yunqing could reach out, he saw Lu Shi and Grandma Su approaching with a fierce expression on their faces. With a glance from the old lady, Lu walked over and snatched the 1 or 2 silver coins from Su Fugue's hand, handing them over to the old lady. "Mother," she said. The old lady glanced at her and then put it away, angrily saying, "Guer, what are you doing? You gave all the money to this lowly hoof, and the family won't eat or drink anymore. Mother, please return that silver to me quickly. Qing'er is getting married, how can I, as a father, not give anything? What should I give? It's already the greatest kindness for you to raise her so much. Give her money back, let's not do it again, otherwise I wouldn't have your son. After the old lady finished speaking, she glared at Su Yunqing standing next to her, snorted, and was helped by Lu Shi to leave. Su Yunqing glanced at Su Fugue who was still standing there and said, "Why don't you leave? I'm busy and don't have time to entertain you." "Qing'er, it's all because my dad's useless." Su Yunqing was too lazy to listen to him continue to say meaningless things and pushed the door in. "Mother, have you come back?" Ku'er saw that she had come back, and the little dog was no longer fragrant. She ran over and hugged her thigh, and her eyes caught a glimpse of Su Fugue, who was about to leave outside the door. "Mother, who is outside?" Su Yunqing freed up one hand to touch her already dry hair and smiled, "It's not someone who took the wrong path. Ku'er will go to the chair and sit down first. My mother will hang the clothes and tie your hair." "Okay." Shenku obediently walked into the inner room and brought out 2 chairs, then obediently sat there waiting. Su Yunqing glanced at her obedient little figure, quickly finished drying her clothes, wiped the water from her hands, and then walked over to sit down and tie her hair. The little girl's hair is very thin and soft, and after washing with shampoo, it becomes even smoother. It feels like she's about to slip away from her fingers when holding it in her hand. She picked up a comb and directly gave her 2 small tugs, tied a headband, and set off her pink and tender little face like a cute New Year painting doll. "The bun that my mother combed is really beautiful." The little girl held a mirror and looked at it carefully, her mouth sweet. Su Yunqing was praised somewhat awkwardly. She just came over and actually doesn't know much about many things here, including hair buns. She just saw a child tied up like this on the street. At this moment, Shen returned and Shenku walked up to him, like offering a treasure. "Dad, look at the bun my mother has combed for me, how beautiful it looks." Shen glanced at Su Yunqing sitting there, then turned to Shenku and said, "It looks good." "Dad, what did you catch?" Shen Luo heard the sound and ran out of the inner room, tiptoeing to see what was in his dad's basket. Shen put down the basket and took out a rabbit and a wild chicken, both still bouncing around. "Dad, let's not kill the rabbit, okay?" Shenku touched the furry rabbit and begged. Shenan Song nodded indulgently and said, Don't kill, let Ku'er take care of her." Su Yunqing walked over and glanced at a small handful of wild vegetables in the basket. She picked them up and glanced at them. "This is water celery. Where did you pick them?" Upon hearing her words, Shenan's gaze fell on the water celery she was holding in her hand. "Just by the small river at the foot of the back mountain, I picked it back to feed Ku'er rabbits," he said. Upon hearing this, Su Yunqing's mind immediately thought of the way to make money. This water celery can be sold for money, and there must be other wild vegetables on the mountain, such as wild onions and spring bamboo shoots. During dinner, Su Yunqing glanced at the man sitting across from him, eating slowly with his head down, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Well, I want to go up the mountain and pick some wild vegetables to sell." Upon hearing her words, Shen paused as he picked up the vegetables and looked up at her. "Are you saying that water celery?" "Well, besides celery, there are also other things like spring bamboo shoots." Shen thought she didn't have any money to spend, so he took out the last bit of money from home and gave it to her. "I'll go to the county tomorrow to find a job copying books. I'll take care of it and earn more silver," he said. Su Yunqing didn't take the money he handed over and said, "Why are you giving me money? I still have money here. I was thinking of doing some business. This family can't live like this all the time. These 2 children need to eat well, supplement their nutrition, and earn more money, which is always good. Do you think I'm a woman and doing business is not good?" Shen shook his head. He never thought about letting her, like a woman, make a name for herself and work hard to earn money. What would he do as a man? Since it's not the case, then that's the decision. You don't have to look for any copying work anymore. Give me your help, I have confidence that I can definitely earn more than copying. Shen nodded and, seeing her persistence, followed her. Chapter 6 Catching Wild Boars. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The next morning, the two of them had breakfast and carried their baskets up the mountain. Due to sufficient rainfall and fertile soil, the vegetation on the hillside grew lush and lush. As soon as they arrived at the small river, Yunqing was immediately stunned by the fresh and green water celery in front of him. Don't the people in this village love to eat this? Yunqing couldn't help but wonder whether the villagers in this village don't know or haven't noticed, and there are no signs of being picked. Shen, who had already rolled up his pants and was preparing to go into the water, heard her words and replied, "Now it's the spring plowing season, and everyone is busy planting crops, so we haven't had time to go up the mountain to pick wild vegetables yet." Yunqing's heart was filled with joy, and it happened that everything on the mountain was hers during this time. She put down her backpack and was also preparing to go into the water. The man spoke out to stop her, saying that the water was cold, and asked her to help put it into the backpack on the side. Yunqing suddenly felt that this man could still get along, at least he knew how to care about people. Shen's movements were quick, and in no time, he picked a basket full of vegetables. Yunqing asked him to pick them himself, while she wandered around to see if there were any other wild vegetables. As she walked, suddenly her eyes lit up with wild onions, not just one. She ran happily to the spot just now and took a shovel from her backpack to start digging. These wild onions were much more fragrant than the ones she had bought or grown, such as fried eggs or pancakes. Because the soil is relatively wet, it is also much easier to dig, and in no time, a lot was dug. At this moment, Shen had already packed 2 baskets of water celery and was walking over to find her when he saw her digging a pile of wild onions. "Wait for me here, I'll carry these back and come back, and don't go deep into the mountains." Yun nodded and said, "I understand. You can go back." After he left, she walked back to the bamboo forest in front and found many spring bamboo shoots. She was happily digging for them. Suddenly, a humming sound came from behind. She turned around and saw nothing, but the sound became clearer and seemed to be coming towards her. She was afraid of being a wild beast, so she hid behind a big tree. In no time, I really saw a wild boar walking out of the grass and sniffing around with its nose tube. It should be hungry, looking for food to eat. Yunqing squatted down and held a wooden stick in her hand, thinking that if she pounced on her, she would at least be able to resist before the man came over. And the wild boar seemed to have seen her too, staring straight at her and walking towards her step by step. She retreated step by step and said, "Beiji, second senior brother, Marshal Tianping, brother pig, I have no intention of offending you. Can we discuss this together?" The wild boar didn't discuss with her and even accelerated its speed, charging directly towards her. At this moment, Yunqing's heart was about to rise to her throat, but she tried her best to stay calm. She looked at the big tree next to her and smashed the wooden stick in her hand at the wild boar, then quickly climbed onto the branch. And the wild boar dodged the wooden stick and came to the bottom of the big tree, looking up at the people above. Yunqing hugged the tree trunk with both hands, breathed a little relief, and then looked down at the wild boar below. "Humph, do you have the ability to come up here?" The wild boar snorted and hit the tree with its body. Yunqing regrets provoking it. Although she is not afraid of strong men, she is afraid of wild boars. This thing has aggression and may even bite people. At this moment, she heard footsteps and thought it was probably the man coming. She shouted at him, "Xianggong." The wild boar heard the sound and was scared to run, but didn't expect it to be running in the direction of Shen, and Yunqing was worried that the man would be attacked, so he jumped off the tree and picked up the wooden stick to run over. Unexpectedly, Shen was hitting the boar's forehead with his shovel. The next second, the boar fell to the ground and kicked twice before burping. It took Yunqing a while to recover from the shock. From his appearance and his walking style, she could vaguely guess that this man had extraordinary skills, but she didn't expect to kill such a big wild boar with just one hammer. In fact, she only saw this hammer, and before she arrived, the wild boar had already been hit several times by Shen. "Did you hurt anything?" He walked up to her and spoke out in concern. Yunqing shook her head and said, "No. This wild boar must have escaped from the deep mountains. He was careless. He heard that a few years ago, wild boars were rampant on the mountain, and several nearby villages organized male soldiers to catch them on a large scale, driving them all into the deep mountains. Unexpectedly, they came out again, but fortunately nothing happened." Yunqing glanced at the wild boar with a bloody skull and said, "How can we get it back?" "I'll carry the wild boar, you carry those dug wild vegetables and spring bamboo shoots. Let's start with these today, and it's not too early to go back and finish dealing with the wild boar." "Okay." Yunqing packed wild onions and spring bamboo shoots into a basket and carried them on his back. Shen carried the wild boar ahead, and she followed behind him. Two people walking home together. And as soon as they returned to the intersection, they met a group of children playing, so everyone in the neighborhood quickly learned that Shen had caught a wild boar, and the yard was immediately surrounded by many people. "Hey, is this wild boar so big? No one in our village has ever caught such a big wild boar, has they?" The speaker is Antgua, who usually likes to be greedy for small gains. It's beneficial, but how could she be spared? Everyone else agrees to her words. "Yeah, this wild boar is too big, at least 300 pounds. I didn't expect Brother Shen to be so lucky. This wild boar meat only smells good with wine. How does Brother Shen plan to deal with it?" Matzi pushed forward and looked at the wild boar lying on the ground. He had already figured out what kind of wine would be most suitable for it. Du Feng had always looked down on this lazy and shameless Matzi, and said in a loud voice, "Matzi, this wild boar was taken care of by his brother Shen. What does it matter to you how he handles it? You don't want to be shameless and want to share a little, do you?" Matzi was annoyed by what he said and walked over, looking up at him. "Du Feng, who's shameless? I'll ask what's going on." "I didn't ask you again. I want you to keep talking." Yunqing took out a bucket of boiled hot water from the kitchen. Shen had already finished draining the pig blood and was about to pour it out when Yunqing stopped him. "Don't pour this out for now, keep it useful," he said. Shen glanced at her but didn't say anything, just gave it to her, and then quickly began to scald and shave. Matzi squatted down and let out a hee-hee. He rolled up his sleeve and began to help. "Oh, Brother Shen, I can help you. I don't want too much, just give me half a pound to drink. How about that? You're really shameless. No one would ask someone for it on their own." As he spoke, someone next to him mocked him, but he didn't care. "Okay, everyone will take some back and try it later. After all, we have seen it, and it's not easy for neighbors to hide it and eat it themselves. In fact, Shen is also repaying kindness. 3 years ago, when he came here with his 2 children to settle down, Shen Luo and Shen Ku were only over a year old. If it weren't for the help of these neighbors to take care of them, as a big man, he wouldn't have been able to raise the 2 children to such an old age. So he has always remembered their kindness in his heart." Chapter 7. Selling wild boar meat and wild vegetables. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Others were also embarrassed to take it for free, so they all came to help and quickly cleaned up the wild boar. Shen divided a piece among the people present, about 1 pound. One by one, they happily returned home. "I don't want that thing anymore, I'll bury it later." Shen turned around and saw Yunqing rummaging through the pig organs that had been thrown aside. Yunqing didn't listen to him and put them all in the bucket. "Don't throw them away, they're also good things. Take them and wash them clean. After making them, they will be delicious. Then you keep it, I'll go wash it later." "No need, I'll go. You divide the pork, leave some for us to eat ourselves, sell the rest together, and borrow a car. When I finish washing these things and come back, we'll go to the county town." Shen nodded and said, "Okay, I got it." Su Yunqing carried the bucket of pigs into the water and came to the small river. There were not many people at the moment. She took out some flour and salt from the space, rubbed the pig's large intestine a few times, and then washed it repeatedly with water until there was no smell. Pork lungs are filled with salt and baijiu, then filled with water, and then rubbed with both hands until blood and dirt are squeezed out, and finally washed with clean water. When she finished handling these things and went back, Shen had already borrowed a cart. He had a good reputation in this village, so when he asked someone to borrow something, most people would lend it to him. "Father, mother, Ku'er also wants to go." Shen Ku heard that they were going to the county town, pouting and playing coquettish by pulling Su Yunqing's clothes. Su Yunqing glanced at the man loading the car and said, "Why don't you let the two of them go too and buy 2 sets of clothes for them? Then you must be obedient and not run around." Shen looked at them both and said in a serious tone. When Shen Ku heard that she could go, her little head nodded like pounding garlic, and her little mouth responded sweetly, "Ku'er will obediently listen to my father and mother's words." Su Yunqing put the washed pig water into the pot and slowly cooked it with the burning charcoal. The family of 4 then went out to the county town. The man was pulling the car in front, while Su Yunqing and Shen Luo and Shen Ku sat in the car. When they reached the uphill section, she came down to help push the car. Shen didn't originally need her to push the cart, it was Su Yunqing who felt embarrassed. After all, her body was almost catching up with the weight of the car. They walked for almost half an hour before reaching the county town. Then he found a stall and unloaded all the things on the car. Su Yunqing went to buy 2 strings of tomatoes on sticks for Shen Luo and Shen Ku, and let them sit on the car and eat. She and Shen were responsible for collecting money, and the other was responsible for binding. It is now March in the sunny spring shortly after the cold winter, and the seasonal vegetables have not yet been on the market. Therefore, most of the products sold in the market are those that can be stored, such as Chinese cabbage, radish, potatoes, etc. People have long been tired of eating them. So as soon as their green wild vegetables were displayed, they immediately caught people's attention, and without shouting, people gathered around them. Su Yunqing looked at the lady standing at the front and smiled, "Madam, this is a wild vegetable just picked from the mountain. It's very fresh and tender. How about some?" The old lady heard her words and reached out to pick up a bundle of water celery. She carefully looked at it and said, "How do we sell this?" As soon as she spoke, others followed suit and asked, "How much is this wild onion? And this spring bamboo shoot?" Water celery costs 4 won per kilogram, wild onions also cost 4 won, and spring bamboo shoots cost 6 won. That's all for today. After selling it out, we'll close the stall. Su Yunqing said, asking Shen next to him to also present the wild boar meat. The freshly killed wild boar meat is fresh and shiny, and looks very fresh at first glance. The lady who asked about water celery looked at the wild boar meat displayed again and said, "How do you sell this meat?" The meat costs 35 won per kilogram. This is freshly killed wild boar meat, and it's not something that can be bought casually. The lady pondered for a moment and spoke out, "Then give me a pound of water celery and a pound of wild boar meat." "Okay, auntie." Finally, Su Yunqing suppressed her joy and quickly asked the man to wrap it up, while she collected the change. After the lady bought it, everyone else who was watching also wanted to buy it. In no time, 1/3 of the wild vegetables had already been sold. Sisters, remember to blanch these spring bamboo shoots with boiling hot water before stir-frying them. This way, the stir-fried ones will be crispy and delicious. Everyone was also satisfied with her thoughtful reminder and praised her for doing business. Su Yunqing smiled sweetly. Isn't this person just trying to have a smiling face when buying things? You have to keep your face cold, and they don't want to stick a hot face to a cold buttocks. Hurry up what you want to buy, sell it out and then close the stall. Su Yunqing shouted, and some people walked over. The two of them were busy collecting money and packing, but they didn't notice that there were two pairs of eyes staring at them not far away. The two of them were Lu Shi and Su Siyu. "Mother, isn't that Su Yunqing's cheap hoof? Is that the man next to her, right? They seem to be selling something. Should we go and take a look?" Lu Shi grabbed a woman passing by and looked at the wild vegetables in her hand, saying, "Auntie, may I ask what those two people in front are selling?" "Wild vegetables, didn't you see them?" The aunt left in a hurry. "Mom, let's go over and take a look." The two of them hid in the corner behind Su Yunqing and Shen, quietly observing. Su Yunqing was busy collecting money, and there were only a few wild vegetables and pork left. In less than an hour, they were almost sold out, indicating that business was still good. She suddenly turned her head to look at the two milk dolls on the car, but at the corner of her eye, she accidentally saw the two heads that couldn't be retracted in time. She sneered in her heart, afraid that she might not have seen her making money in making some plans. "Mom, that scumbag seems to have seen us. I saw it as soon as I saw it, what else can I do?" "I'm leaving, I'm going back," Lu said, preparing to go back. "No, Mom, this thing sells so well. Why don't we also sell it? There are wild boars on the mountain, dare you go up there?" "How dare they go up? Have you forgotten what that man does? Let's just call Dad and second uncle, there are two big men who are even more afraid." Lu felt that her words also made sense. "Well, then go back and discuss with your grandmother." The two of them muttered and turned around to look at Su Yunqing, who was happily collecting money, before hurriedly leaving. The last few pounds of wild vegetables were all bought by a man. Su Yunqing looked at the less than 5 pounds of wild boar meat left, so she decided not to sell it and went to change the clothes for the two milk dolls. The shopkeeper of the tailor's shop was quite talkative. With an extra 21, she changed 2 new clothes for each of the 2 children. She originally wanted to buy one for this man, but he said no, so Su Yunqing followed him. After buying clothes, it seemed like time was almost over, and the family of 4 were ready to return to the village. Chapter 8. Fragrance Confused. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. On the way back, the car only carried people and nothing else, and the body was much lighter. Shen didn't ask Su Yunqing to help push the car, so she sat in the car with Shen Luo and Shen Ke all the way, and then Shen pulled the car in front. Shen Ke snuggled up in Su Yunqing's arms and affectionately rubbed her chin with her small head. Her voice was soft and sticky, "Mother, it's really good." Su Yunqing touched her little brain and said, "Kur, what does Kur want to eat? Mother will make it for you." "Kur wants to eat eggs, as well as meat, fish." The little girl was counting with her fingers, her mouth watering. Su Yunqing was amused by her appearance, raised her hand and gently scraped her small nose, doting on her and saying, "Okay, my mother will do it for you," she said as she looked at Shen Ke sitting next to her, who was quiet and had a slightly cool face. "What about you?" Shen Luo wrinkled his nose and said, "I'm not Kuer, little greedy cat. I won't pick." Upon hearing his words, Shen Ke pouted and said, "Mother, if he speaks ill of Kuer, she is not a little greedy cat. All right, you two are good babies. My mother will cook delicious food for you when she goes back. The braised meat in the pot should be ready, with a lot of ingredients added, and the taste must be good." Shen, who was walking ahead, listened to their words and the corners of his mouth unconsciously raised slightly, indicating that the 2 children indeed needed a mother. After all, children will grow up day by day. It's better for Luo to be a boy, while Kuer is a girl. It would be inconvenient for him to be a big man. When they returned home, they smelled a fragrance, and not only did they smell it, but their neighbors also smelled it. They were standing one by one at Shen's doorstep, stretching their heads and looking into their yard. Then when they saw them coming back, they all gathered around. The first person to speak was Aunt Gua. "Shen, what have you cooked in your house? It smells so fragrant." The tiger mother next to her also agreed to her words. Yes, yes, I haven't smelled anyone cooking so delicious. Su Yunqing smiled and said, Sister-in-law, this is stewed wild boar meat. Didn't you go back and cook it? Why didn't they go back and cook it? As soon as they took it back, they cooked it and ate it. After all, it's not easy to put some meat in it. As soon as everyone heard it was wild boar meat, they didn't feel embarrassed to stay any longer. After all, they had already divided the meat for them, so thinking about it would be too greedy. Su Yunqing saw everyone leave, pushed the door in, and headed straight to the kitchen. The closer he got, the stronger the aroma. When he opened the lid of the pot, he saw that the pig feet inside had been stewed soft and delicious, with a strong aroma that made the children next door cry. She found a pair of chopsticks, picked up a piece and tasted it. It was almost fragrant. Two small ones, not high enough for the stove, looked up at her with their little heads up and licking their lips. Little greedy cat. Su Yunqing took 2 bowls, each containing a soft and sticky pig foot, blew some air, and then placed it on the table for the 2 of them to eat. It's still a bit hot, wait until it cools down before eating, you know. The 2 dolls saw that the meat in the bowl was already swallowing incessantly, especially Shen, who didn't care about the heat and immediately grabbed it and nibbled on it. Shen, who came in from behind, saw the large pot of braised pork with a tempting aroma and couldn't help but be curious. What did you put in here? Su Yunqing was cooking and glanced at him without hiding anything. He directly told him what was added, and the man frowned slightly because he had never heard of some of them. You can sit down too, I'll give you a piece to try. Because everyone went out without having lunch, they should be hungry by now. Shen nodded and turned his head to look at the 2 little ones, their mouths full of oil. He pulled a cloth and gently wiped their mouths. Su Yunqing turned around and smiled. Although this man was tall and burly, he was just a rough man. As she observed, he was quite patient with the 2 little ones, but not careful enough. For example, she didn't notice that the child was picky about food before. She was just a little curious. These 2 children didn't look like him at all, they should be like their mother. Their mother had to be such a stunning woman to give birth to such a beautiful child. At this moment, a somewhat awkward voice rang out. Yes, it was the man's stomach growling, pulling Su Yunqing's attention back. She pursed her lips and smiled, taking a large bowl to give the man a large piece of pig's hoof and braised pork belly. She handed it to him and said, try it. Shen reached out to take the meat she handed over, picked up a piece and blew air before feeding it into his mouth. However, he just took a sip and was stunned. The wild boar meat was stewed so that it melted in his mouth, fat but not greasy. I didn't expect this wild boar meat to be so delicious, so I suddenly became curious about her cooking skills. Su Yunqing looked at him expectantly and said, how about it? Is it delicious? Shen took another sip and nodded. It's delicious, even better than what's in the Drunken Immortal Tower. Drunken Immortal Tower. What is that place? Shen realized that he had said something he shouldn't have said, shook his head, and said, I'm just talking nonsense, it's really delicious. At least he has never tasted such delicious wild boar meat before. Su Yunqing smiled and said, that must be delicious. It's braised with over 20 different ingredients. She has decided to sell braised meat in the future. Anyway, there is plenty of meat in the department store, not just meat, but other things can also be sold for money. She seems to have seen wealth waving at her. Mother, I still want to eat. Shen had already finished nibbling on the pig's feet in the bowl, and her greasy little paws were grabbing her sleeve at the moment. You still want to eat, okay, Mom can help you pick it up. Su Yunqing picked up another piece for her. Here, eat slowly. If you're full, you can't eat anymore, otherwise you'll have to hold on. Shen nibbled on the meat and kept nodding his little head. Su Yunqing looked at Shen and said, Xianggong, can you make that scooter? I think if you know how to make it, you can make one. We will all need it later. It doesn't feel good to keep asking others for help. Upon hearing her words, Shen paused for a moment and said, "Yes, I do, but this is not a simple task. You don't have to wait until you earn more money to buy a car. Also, that car belongs to Du Feng and he doesn't use it very much. It's dusty. It's okay to borrow it and use it." Su Yunqing nodded and said, "Okay, then when we make money, give him some silver and treat it as renting him." "Well, it's up to you to decide." A few people ate meat directly and were already full, leaving some for dinner. In the afternoon, Shen went to help the Du family with work. Su Yun was idle and took out some fresh pork and pig feet from the department store, cleaned them thoroughly, and then put them in braised soup. Then I marinated some fish and hung them under the eaves to air dry. After finishing these, she looked at the water tank and ran out of water, then picked up 2 buckets and went to the river to fetch water. Unfortunately, I ran into Su Siyu again. She didn't have the heart to talk to her, but Su Siyu was despicable. When I saw her, I sneered and said, "Oh, Shen is so useless. You have to carry water. TSK, after all, you're used to this kind of crude work." Su Yunqing remained silent and focused on fetching water, only to see her throwing stones upstream, making the water murky and pretending innocent. "Oh my hands are slippery, I didn't catch them," she said. Su Yunqing was so angry that he put down the pole in his hand and walked over directly. He grabbed her hair and pressed the person into the water. Su Siyu's small physique was no match for Su Yunqing's, and he struggled hard but couldn't get away. He took several sips of river water and his hair was soaked. If it weren't for watching someone come over, Su Yunqing wouldn't want to let her go so quickly. "I warn you, don't provoke me, otherwise it wouldn't be as simple as drinking river water, humph." Su Yunqing pushed her away and then moved to another place to fetch water. Chapter 9. Shen falls and hurts his leg. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Su Siyu was angry, but fighting alone, she was not Su Yunqing's opponent. She spat on the ground and said, "Pooh, you scumbag, you fat woman. Don't let me seize the opportunity, or else I'll kill you." She also saw someone coming and immediately took another shortcut back home. After all, her clothes were getting wet and sticking to them didn't look good. Su Yunqing glanced at the hastily departing figure, lightly curled her lips, and carried 2 buckets of water back. And as soon as she returned to the courtyard door, she saw Du Feng carrying Shen back and saying, "Brother Du, what's going on?" Du Feng glanced at her and said, "Brother Shen accidentally injured his leg. Let's talk inside. I'll go find a doctor to come over and show him later." "Okay, Brother Du." Su Yunqing walked ahead, pushed the door open, and went straight to the kitchen. He put down the water and walked towards the room. Du Feng placed Shen on the bed, perhaps in too much pain, and the man's face turned pale for a moment. "Then take care of him and I'll go find the doctor," Du Feng said to Su Yunqing before turning around and leaving. Su Yunqing originally intended to say that she could also watch, but when she saw that the person had already left, she followed him. She glanced and saw that Du Feng had some experience, knowing how to fix his calves with a wooden stick. Shen Luo and Shen Ku were frightened and stood by the bed, especially Shen Ku, who had the least courage and was afraid that something might happen to her father. Her small mouth deflated and she cried directly, "Dad." "Ku doesn't cry, Dad is fine," Su Yunqing comforted her by holding her in his arms. Shen En's face showed a soft expression and he said, "Luo worker, don't worry, you accidentally fell and it will be fine soon." "Really? Dad?" Shen Luo lightly touched the leg bound with the wooden stick with his small hand, and his small face, which was flat, could also see the hidden worry. "Well, when did Daddy deceive you?" Not long after, Du Feng rushed over with the doctor. After the examination, it was indeed a fracture, but fortunately it was mild. The doctor said it would take some rest to recover, and Su Yunqing and Du Feng both breathed a sigh of relief. Otherwise, she would have to take care of him and take care of the children alone, and it would be a bit difficult for her to earn money for a long time. The doctor prescribed a prescription to take the medicine and decoct it according to the instructions on it. Du Feng looked at Su Yunqing with some guilt and said, "Sisters, it's all my fault. Brother Shen accidentally rolled off the cliff to save me and got injured. If you need any help, just feel free to ask." Su Yunqing waved her hand and said, "It's not your fault. I know even if it were you, you would do it. Well, I'll go to the pharmacy to get the medicine and come back now." That's all he can do now. He can't let a woman run all the way to the county town to get the medicine. "Okay, I'll trouble you then. It should be." Du Feng finished speaking and left because he had seen the doctor and applied medicine to the wound, which relieved some of the pain. Shen also recovered a bit now and his face turned slightly red. Su Yunqing saw that it was almost time, so he let his 2 children accompany him and then went to the kitchen to cook dinner by himself. Because there is braised meat, all you need to do is cook some rice and stir-fry 2 more vegetables. After thinking for a while, she cooked a pot of pork bone soup for Shen. As the saying goes, the shape complements the shape, and drinking more is always beneficial. Half an hour later, dinner was ready, and she brought it to the dining table in the main room. She asked the 2 little ones to eat first, and then filled a large bowl of rice and soup for Shen to deliver. "Let's eat first. Brother Du has gone to the county town to collect medicine. After eating, we will drink the medicine later." Shen glanced at her and then his gaze fell on the food she was carrying. "Don't go up the mountain tomorrow, I can't go here. You're alone. What if you run into a wild boar again?" Su Yun nodded and said, "I know, I won't go." She also has vegetables in her department store, and she plans to sell braised and cooked dishes tomorrow, which is better than wild vegetables. She didn't remember it in the morning, otherwise she wouldn't have gone up the mountain and tossed around. Shen responded to what she said, and then started eating. At this moment, Du Feng returned with a few packets of medicine in his hand. Su Yunqing gave him money, but he refused to ask, "Sisters, how can I take the money?" "Take it back." Su Yunqing looked at Shen, who nodded and put it away. She then went to the kitchen pot and filled it with a bowl of braised meat for him to take back. "Brother Du, don't want the money. Take this meat back and give it to Huzi to eat," she said. Du Feng saw that she was chasing her to the door, so he reached out and took her over. "Thank you very much, then I'll leave. I'll come see Brother Shen again tomorrow." "Hey, Brother Du, take your time." Su Yunqing watched as the person walked away before entering the room and sitting down at the table to eat. "Mother, shall I sleep with you tonight?" Su Yunqing took a clean cloth and wiped her mouth for a while. "Okay, then both of you will sleep with your mother tonight. Don't disturb your dad," she said. "Tomorrow morning, my mother is going to the county town. You should stay at home and accompany my father. My mother will prepare the food and put it in the kitchen pot. If you are hungry, you can go and eat it yourself, right?" Shen Luo nodded and said, "I understand, mother." At first, he didn't like her very much, thinking that it was his father who spent all the money in the family to marry her. But now that the family has eaten more than before, he forgave her. Su Yunqing reached out and rubbed his little head. "Eat your meal quickly." The 2 little ones obediently ate all the meat and vegetables that Su Yunqing had given them, and they were not as picky as they were at the beginning. This is what Su Yunqing is most pleased with. Children are still young, and some bad habits should be discovered and corrected in a timely manner, otherwise it will be difficult to change them when they grow up. After dinner, it was already dark. Su Yunqing tidied up the dishes and boiled water to wash the feet of the 2 children, so they went to bed first. Then he brought a basin of water to Shen An's house. Although his legs were inconvenient, his face still needed to be washed. She pushed the door in and walked to the bed. "This is hot water that has been cooked. You can wash your face. It will help you sleep better. There are also dirty clothes. Change them out and I will wash them for you." He works during the day and his clothes still have some mud on them. Shen opened his eyes and glanced at the wooden basin placed on the chair, then propped up the bed board under him and moved it towards the edge of the bed. Yunqing handed him the wet towel. "I'll do it myself." Yunqing knew he was embarrassed, so he didn't force himself. "I'll come in and tidy up later," he said. She found him clean clothes from the wardrobe, placed them by the bed, and then went out, closing the door by the way. At night, the small mountain village is particularly quiet. Due to the weather, the moon also hides in the clouds, and everywhere is pitch black, with only the bright light shining through every household's windows. This is Yunqing's second night here, and she's not used to it yet. When she earns money, she will definitely leave this small village and buy a big house. The yard is full of lanterns, shining brightly like daylight. Suddenly, there was a clang in the room, and Yunqing quickly pushed the door in. Then he saw that the basin of water had been knocked over, and the man was also naked in his upper body. Chapter 10. Baorou Baozi. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Shen reacted and casually pulled the nearby blanket over his body, snorting softly to break the awkwardness. Yunqing withdrew her gaze from him, walked over calmly, picked up the wooden basin, and said, "Can I go and fetch you another basin of water?" She was about to turn around and walk out when Shen stopped her and said, "No need, I've cleaned it up." "Okay, you should rest earlier." After Yunqing left, she patted her slightly hot cheeks. Unexpectedly, even if this man was good-looking, his figure was not bad. He should have 8 abdominal muscles, and even she, who was originally a person with few desires, almost lost her composure. After returning to the room, the 2 milk dolls were already asleep. She blew out the oil lamp and lay down next to them. My hands were resting on the back of my head, my eyes fixed on the black protruding beam, and I listened to the even breathing of the 2 little guys in my ear. I turned my head and looked up, with the corners of my mouth gently raised. After a while, I also fell asleep. The next day, before dawn, Yunqing woke up and glanced at the 2 sleeping children. He tucked them in the corner of his blanket and then got out of bed and opened the door to go out. In the quiet morning courtyard, she stretched lazily and walked towards the kitchen. First, mix the noodles and set them aside to wake them up. Then, take out a fresh piece of meat from the space, clean it, cut it into pieces, chop it into filling, and set it aside for later use. After washing a few feet of rice, they put them in the pot to cook porridge. At this point, the dough also woke up and was divided into evenly sized pills, and then the buns were wrapped. Because I don't usually pack too much, my movements are quite agile. In no time, I wrapped 2 large curtains. She first put some in the pot to steam, and the rest in the refrigerator in the space to freeze. Next time she eats, she just takes it out and steam it. Taking advantage of this gap, she found a large pot from the space, put the braised meat in it, and brought out several baskets of vegetables, all of which were fresh and green vegetables, such as Chinese tune, shepherd's purse, and fern. She looked at them and found that they were also found on the mountains. In addition to meat and vegetables, there are also sweet potatoes and mushrooms, all of which have been improved in the 21st century, but they are many times better than the current ones, so she is confident that they can be sold. Mother. Shen came out of the room with sleepy eyes and saw her loading a car. She also came over with short legs to help. Yunqing smiled and said, "Did Ko-er wake up from sleep?" "My mother made meat buns and steamed them for Ko-er to eat later." "Okay, Ko loves eating meat buns the most." "Well, then you go see if Dad's awake." The little one nodded obediently and then headed towards the house where Shen lived. After a while, he ran out and said in a worried voice, "Mother, Dad has fallen." Upon hearing this, Yunqing put down his work and hurriedly walked in, only to see Shen holding onto the bedside, wanting to stand up. She quickly walked over and said, "Are you going to?" Before she could finish speaking, she saw his face turn red from holding back. She immediately reacted and helped him sit down by the bed. Wait a moment, I'll go find a night pot for you. She pretended to go out and search, walked outside the door and directly took one out of the space. Then she walked in and said, "You can make do with it, Kur, let's go out. The buns are cooked now." She walked out holding Kuer and closed the door by the way. Shen in the room looked at the brand new night pot on the ground, but didn't think much about where she came from. He picked it up and after solving it, he felt relaxed and at ease. In the kitchen, Yunqing carefully opened the lid of the pot, and the aroma of steamed buns wafted through her nose. She took a pair of chopsticks, took some out, and left the rest in the pot for lunch. The congee cooked nearby can also be cooked. She took a basin and put some out to cool. He took another steamed bun and blew it, then handed it to Shenku. "Kuer, take your time eating here. Mom, go and bring food to Dad and shout, brother. Okay, Mother." Yunqing touched her little head and then went out with breakfast for Shen. Shen heard the sound of pushing the door in, opened his eyes, looked towards the door, and saw that she had entered. He sat up again. "I made some meat buns, you try them. I have to go and wake up Luo, and I'll come over and tidy them up later." Shen remained silent and his gaze caught a glimpse of her reddened hand back, which was particularly prominent due to her fair skin. "You." Yunqing saw him looking at his hand and casually explained, "This is when I opened the lid of the pot just now, I accidentally got scalded by the hot air. It's not serious, it will be fine tomorrow. You can eat it." After she finished speaking, she turned around and walked out, directly returning to the room to call Shen Luo. As soon as she entered, she saw that someone had already gotten up and even put on her clothes herself. "Kuer and Dad are already having breakfast. Come on, I'll put on your shoes." Yunqing squatted down to help him put on his shoes. Shen Luo supported the bedside with one hand and rested the other on her shoulder. Yunqing looked up at him and said softly, "Luo is going to stay at home with his father and sister today. My mother will go to the county town and bring you some delicious food after finishing, okay?" Shen Luo nodded obediently and said, "I understand, Mother. You're so good." Yunqing helped him put on his shoes and then carried him out directly. Shenku had already finished one bun and was eating the second one. When she saw them coming in, she sweetly praised them and said, "Brother, the meat buns made by my mother are really delicious. Just know how to eat, little greedy cat." Yunqing put Shen Luo on the chair, and then brought him steamed stuffed buns and a bowl of white rice porridge cooked soft and glutinous. She went to one side, took 2 packages of children's mustard tuber out of the space, poured them into a plate, and then put some into their bowls. "Here, this is for you to use with congee." Shen Luo scooped out a spoonful of porridge and put it into his mouth together with mustard tuber. Shenku was also like that. The two of them giggled. Yunqing quickly finished her own meal and then went to Shen An's house. After coming out, the 2 milk dolls also finished eating. She washed all the dishes together, and then reminded the 2 of them to go out with the things in the car. She was actually a woman, but her physical strength was not as good as that of a man. She saw Shen pulling this car with the 3 of them sitting on it, as if they didn't need much effort. Now that she has not walked half the way, she has not had much strength left. She stopped by the roadside, hands crossed over her waist, and decided to take a break before walking. However, thinking of going early and returning early, she didn't rest for too long. After a slight relaxation, she continued to set off. This time, I breathed a sigh of relief and didn't stop halfway, walking straight to the county town. At this point, many people had already come out to buy things on the street. She found a vacant spot and unloaded all the things from the car.